Right, so Peter Mandelson is becoming an Epstein-sized problem for Keir Starmer, and he can't say he wasn't warned. The moment the mainstream media start asking questions about what Starmer knew when he took him on as an advisor about Mandelson and his relationship with Epstein, you can tell they're now probing him for weaknesses. That all of a sudden the ice cream sundae with cherry on the top treatment he's got from them up until now, as we tilt towards a general election, is perhaps finally over. A question on Mandelson, a really quite softball question really, that Starmer ought to have seen coming down the road months ago, must have known it was coming at some point, or should have known, ended up completely flooring him as it turns out, following his speech in Bristol, which bodes very ill indeed as more and more redacted Epstein case material is due to emerge. And Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is now so well documented, the longer Starmer keeps him on, the more of a liability he's likely to prove to be. Right, so Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein. They were close. Epstein nicknamed him PT. Although Mandelson doesn't feature in this latest batch of unredacted names that have been released from the former Epstein case files, we're told there is still a lot more to come. There is more to be released, so watch this space. He might crop up yet. That said, we don't need to wait and see if Mandelson crops up in any new material, because there's plenty of old material, isn't there? And the mainstream media, not having picked up on Mandelson and Epstein's relationship with Keir Starmer previously, well, that's a massive failing on their part to not hold power to account. Because Keir Starmer wants all the power, doesn't he? He wants the top job, to be PM. And one of his top advisors has got not insignificant links to a man convicted of child trafficking and paedophilia. This did hit the headlines, though not put to Keir Starmer at all. The fact Starmer had resurrected this relic of the 1990s and of Blairism, as Peter Mandelson is, to advise him, apparently not important enough to have asked the Labour leader any questions about that up until now. But much of the details we do know about Mandelson and Epstein are only some 6 months old, having come from a previously unreleased internal bank report by JP Morgan Chase that dates back to 2019, the purpose of which was to establish the bank's relationship with Epstein, but which also spelt out that Epstein had a particular close relationship with both Prince Andrew and Peter Mandelson. At that point, by then, Lord Mandelson as he was, so giving Epstein a connection between the British royal family and the government, albeit at that point to the House of Lords. But of course, Epstein and Mandelson's relationship went back years and years before that. Back to when Labour were still in power last time. Back to when Mandelson was indeed still a minister. He was the business secretary under Gordon Brown. What made Mandelson so appealing then? Well, here's what we know. According to Morgan Chase documents, in 2009, Mandelson stayed at Epstein's place in Manhattan. Why? Well, Mandelson has refused to confirm or deny why. But Epstein at that time was behind bars for soliciting a minor, so what gives? Mandelson at the time was business secretary to help Gordon Brown prop up his dying administration and was effectively the de facto deputy prime minister, something Epstein mentioned according to bank records. After Labour got dumped out of power, there are two records of PT staying with Epstein in Paris in 2010 and 2011. There are, of course, earlier infamous photos, such as that photograph of the Caribbean shopping trip from 2005, where we see Mandelson trying on a belt, or in 2007, again in Paris. Now, of course, we know why Epstein was sent down, where he ended up committing suicide in his cell, as is the official line, but few people, if I'm honest, buy that story, given all of Epstein's connections, as are once again coming out now, with the rich and the influential and the powerful, including Mandelson. But we also know that Peter Mandelson is gay, so the procurement of young girls cannot be what Mandelson was in this for. However, Mandelson does have a track record for having a penchant for hanging out with the super rich, something any real, true Labour figure should have been reviled by. Wouldn't want anything to do with, but it does show Mandelson to be the epitome of what it means to be a red Tory, and it has cost Mandelson in the past. He quit as a cabinet member in 1998 after it came out he'd accepted a £378,000 loan to buy a house, and was forced to resign again in 2001 after being accused of helping one of the wealthy Nduja brothers get a passport in return for a £1 million donation to the then Millennium Dome project. He did get cleared of that, but still his buddy to the rich reputation means it still lingers. In 2008, he was involved in another scandal after having been discovered visiting a Russian aluminium billionaire, Oleg Deripaska, on his private yacht off of Corfu. And there was me thinking Russian money was the preserve of the Tories. In 2009, he was a guest of the Rothschild banking dynasty, who only met up at the time with the son of Colonel Gaddafi of Libya. He does love hobnobbing with the rich and famous. So all in all, we know a lot about Mandelson. On top of what I just covered there, he cropped up with no fewer than 11 phone numbers, apparently, in Epstein's little black book. He rang Epstein when he was in prison on child sex offences. He maintained that friendship with Epstein despite what he was accused of. So whether it wasn't his bag or not, he was obviously aware. How could he have not been? He owns a firm which lobbies MPs and the rich and powerful on behalf of other firms, Global Counsel, and of course proudly boasted that he worked every single day to bring down Jeremy Corbyn, because of course Corbyn was no friend of the rich. He was the real deal when it came to Labour, and sadly now we're lumbered with another red Tory in Keir Starmer. And that brings us back to Starmer's speech in Bristol yesterday, doesn't it, where he got put on the spot over his relationship with Peter Mandelson, and whether he thought Mandelson, whether the media thought, or whether Starmer thought that Mandelson really ought to answer some questions over his conduct with Epstein. And really, as I said before, it's something he should have expected to come up at some point, given he chose to bring him on board his team. But he clearly wasn't. Starmer presumably just thinking, oh, well, the media are leaving me alone on everything. They're not really giving me a hard time. They're never going to bring this up, are they? And lo and behold, it's happened. Starmer was asked. The FT, Financial Times, did a report this summer on a JP Morgan report which suggested that Peter Mandelson had stayed at the New York townhouse of Jeffrey Epstein in 2009 when he was de facto Deputy Prime Minister, and while the financier was in prison for soliciting prostitution from a minor. Do you think that Lord Mandelson, who of course is a close political ally of yours, has some questions to answer? It's a really softball question. It's nothing onerous, and it is absolutely something Starmer should have seen coming. Starmer instead fell to bits. He said, on Peter Mandelson, look, I do try to give pretty full answers in these sessions. I don't know any more than you do. And therefore, there's not really much I can add to what you already know, I'm afraid. And, that's simply the state of the affairs. Oh, no, it isn't, Keith. If you know as much as we do, then you know all about Mandelson's checkered history in government and his years-long friendship with Epstein. You mean you never asked him about any of that before recruiting him as a consultant for you? I thought you were across the detail, across the facts. Mr. KC, King's Counsel. I thought you were the tough prosecutor, the former director of public prosecution, Starmer. And this relationship with a convicted felon didn't come up when you were considering bringing Mandy on board your team? Pigs are taking to the air across the country, I hear. There is no way on God's green earth you could possibly have been unaware. I don't buy that for an instant. Your denial in this speech tells me you're lying again. You said you wanted to clean up politics. You said in that speech that people were fed up with Westminster failing them. And in the literal Q&A afterwards, your response to this proves that you're just yet more of the same. If he had any political idea or acumen of his own, he wouldn't have touched Peter Mandelson with a 10-foot barge pole, and yet he still had the brass neck to have a go at Corbyn, who left Mandelson exactly where he belonged, in his crypt. In fact, advisors and consultants are becoming a bit of a thing for Starmer and his Chancellor-in-waiting, Chancellor more like it, Rachel Reeves, because when you have no ideas and no policies, and you need some fast to con your way into power and fleece the votes from unsuspecting voters, thinking that you might be something different, because where Corbyn stopped using consultancies entirely, he didn't need them. He knew exactly what he wanted to do to fix the country. He had plenty of ideas and inspiration, and he brought a larger number of us along with him. Under Keir Starmer, their use has just quadrupled in the run-up to an expected general election this year. Of course, these come in the form of donated time, so their cost equivalent is what goes down as the donation. And as with all donors, what are they getting out of this? It's a question we should all immediately be asking of that. But in the last quarter of 2023, consultancies registered as donations by Labour shot up to an eye-watering £287,000, up from just £72,000 the previous quarter. That is what Keir Starmer is doing with Labour members' donations, because this is a government in waiting that has got absolutely no idea what to do when it gets there. Keir Starmer wants the top job for the sake of it, for his own selfish wants, for his own ambitions, but he has got no clue what he will do in charge of this country once he's there. He is absolutely reliant on people telling him what to do, and that should be terrifying. He is so reliant on others, unelected others, holding his hand, that he's willing to overlook all of Mandelson's past track record so he can hold his. And it is far from the only hand he's holding. If you want competent change in this country, if you want a leader, an actual leader who might be capable of leading and doing something that they thought of themselves, then Labour and Starmer isn't it. Starmer is so bad, he even let the Tories outflank him when it came to calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. He even let them take the lead. He couldn't take the lead on that, of all things, as this video here will tell you all about. Amongst the many other examples I've covered of Starmer's weakness and narcissism and failure, there's a whole playlist if you're so inclined. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.